Hi class, this is Professor Myers. I thought today we would take a look at the week 3 exercise and go through it together. It's a more complex program than we've had to do for the exercises, so I thought there was some value in working through it together. Of course, as a video you can pause it and take a look at things. I'm going to do both a Camtura, which is DeVry's product, and a YouTube video. You may find the YouTube video of higher quality if you can't read the screen clearly. So let's take a look. What it wants us to do this week is to create a calendar program where we're going to enter in a number and translate that to the actual month. And we'll do a little bit of error checking too, so I'll show you quite a few things that maybe aren't really talked about in the lecture as well. One of the things we'll find often is that a lot of translation goes on in programs. For example, the number 3 in this case will be turned into the word March. We see that a lot too, as something like the letters KS are often turned into the word Kansas. So a lot of translations like this go on all of the time. Not unusual at all. So it asks us here to write a program that prompts the user for a number from 1 to 12. After getting the input, change it to the month. So be sure to think about logic and design, but we're also going to do a little bit of error analysis since we now have the ability to compare things, primarily with the if statement. So I'm going to go down through here and go to section 1, which is, of course, my data types, and then to my IPO model. As I've said before, I usually start off with the IPO, and in this case, there's really only one thing coming in, and that is, of course, the month number. The output in this case is going to be a word, so that's pretty obvious. I'm going to call that the month string. The month string is, of course, going to be a string object that contains the entire word. The process is going to be a lookup. Now, this is a little more difficult to actually come up with a little formula here because it's not really a formula. So I generally, in this case, will only do part of it. And remember, this is kind of like pseudocode. So I'm just going to say if month number is equal to 1, then month string is equal to January. So is this complete? No. But sometimes all we need is enough of a prompt to know really what's going on. A programmer is obviously going to be able to figure this out. So we put as much detail as is actually necessary to get this thing programmed. Sometimes in some conversions, like with the state, there's going to be 50 of them, not counting the territories and other districts and so forth, the armed services. So now I can come up here, and data type selection is always questionable as to what to put. We first of all have the month number, and what's the data type going to be? Well, we could say a real, and a real is possible, but we know months don't have fraction, so the best choice is an integer. The other variable is the month string, and that's pretty obvious because I already included the word string. Now, in some languages, there are no strings. There are arrays of characters or groups of characters, and that's really what a string is. Whenever we design our program, we have to come up with the first or the best variable types. So, for example, if we were doing salary, what would that be? Well, if you've watched some of the stuff that I've put in the thread, we know it can't be an integer because there's no decimal. We could say, well, that can be a float. But again, I comment in the threads that floats don't contain enough significant digits to include pennies in many cases. So our best choice there is a double. But this is pre-design. We haven't picked a language yet while we're working on our data dictionary. So probably the best thing to do is pick real, and then later as the program's being designed, the developer would pick the most appropriate data type. Something else to note here is, could salary be a string? And I would venture to say no. We could store it as a string. Numbers can be stored as characters, but generally with a salary, we're going to do some form of math with it. So it would be most likely inappropriate to store as a string. Another question I'm going to ask you, pay attention here. What if I asked you to store a phone number? What's the best data type? Or a social security number? Or a zip code? I may put these in the thread too, so if you watch this video, you'll have you can answer there and look smart. Because our best data choice in all three cases is string. In fact, you wouldn't want to use any other thing. Nothing else would work for these. You say, but Professor Myers, a phone number is just a integer, right? Well, wrong. A phone number has other characters in it. It might have dashes or dots or parentheses. Phone numbers often have letters. Call 1-800-DeVry. So really, integer, very inappropriate. Besides, even if you just list it as numbers, integers by default can only go up to about 2 billion. And a phone number is larger than that, especially with area code and a prefix of 1, not counting country codes and extensions. What about social security numbers? Just a number, right? Well, my social security number has dashes in it, which would be interpreted as minus signs. Another thing is that many social security numbers have letters. If you're a legal alien, you have most likely an A in your social security number. Same with zip codes. Zip codes have dashes in them now, and that would be misinterpreted as a minus sign were you to store a zip code as an integer. As well as in many other countries, such as Canada, the zip code contains letters. So we have to pay special attention to our data types. Of course, these types aren't used by this particular program, and somehow I open that. Okay, so my next step is to come down to the flowchart and figure out how I'm going to approach this.
I got you on my mind, and it's time to make you see what I want. So I'll just make this a little more obvious, 'cause I get what I want and I want you to get with me.
Okay, now notice here I've started off my flowchart and I've got my start block. I get the month number. Now here we can see that of course it's wrapped around. We can see that our text does not completely fit in there, so many of you have taken to increasing the size of these blocks to get everything to fit, and that is not standard in flowcharting. We pretty much leave the shapes, the default shapes. And this is because in the old days we used stencils and there really wasn't a better way of doing it. We just had to make it fit. So generally what you want to do is decrease your font size until everything fits inside, and be concise. Sometimes you have long words. If I do want it to be a larger size, then I'm going to break month number. I'm going to go ahead and break it up into 2 words. Once again, a programmer would understand. Down here, we've got stuff we can't really break up because there's just too much of it. So I'm just going to bump down the size from 8 point down to 7. 7's not a choice here, but I can always just type it in. And it still doesn't fit. Let's go down to 6. And that's a lot better. If it does overlap a little bit, that's not terrible. Another thing I might do is add a carriage return in there and cause it to move down just a little bit, and it fits a lot better. Our true path, if the month number is less than 0 or if it's greater than 12, then we're going to say the month is out of range and our program's going to end. So a little bit of error checking there. So I need to go on and now do the determination. I know I have a good month, so let's go ahead and do it.
So I'll just make this a little more obvious, 'cause I get what I want and I want you to get with me. Don't think you know how far I'm gonna go. You can't stop this feeling. You can't run away.
Okay, so now we have it all set up. We can see our month number for 1 goes to January, else if that's false, then we go on to 2, and so on. Now notice that once we make a selection, we go straight to the end and print out the month that was set. So here we see it is a larger, longer flowchart. It could certainly be arranged in other ways. So it better fits my top to bottom, left to right. One more thing to look at, because we have eliminated everything that's not 1 through 12. There's nothing to do in this last one. If something isn't 1 through 12, is there another false? And the answer is no, there's not. So that means we really don't need to ask this as a question, because if it wasn't 1 through 11, it has to be 12. There's no other option. So now I want to do a Control A, copy it, and I'm going to put it into my Word document. There it is. Fit nicely.